World leaders addressing the General Assembly. Earlier this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to the UNGA. He talked about several topics, including the Abraham Accords, peace deals, and the possibility of newfound peace with Saudi Arabia.
The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. Just as we achieved the Abraham Accords with the leadership of President Trump, I believe we can achieve peace with Saudi Arabia with the leadership of President Biden.
Okay, Ambassador Ido Aharoni, an Israeli career diplomat and distinguished professor at New York University. He joins us live now on set. Ambassador here, I want to ask you about some of the comments here. Prime Minister, he said Israel's on the cusp, maybe, of a breakthrough with peace with Saudi Arabia, creating a bridge between Europe, Asia, Africa for food, infrastructure, medicine. There's going to be a lot of roadblocks. We know a lot of issues. But what's your initial take on such what I think was an optimistic speech?
Well, clearly, peace with Saudi Arabia would be a major, major event in the history of the Zionist movement, in the history of the Israeli-Arab conflict, and in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because we have to understand, from the very early days of political Zionism in the land of Israel, there's not been one day in which the Arabs truly and genuinely accepted Israel's right to exist.
He talked about sort of a new map, what it could look like. This new Middle East is what we heard. But he also had a stark warning for Palestinian Authority. Here's what he had to say about the prospects of deterring peace, even in Jerusalem and those in Palestine.
I've long sought to make peace with the Palestinians. But I also believe that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas must stop spreading the horrible anti-Semitic conspiracies against the Jewish people and the Jewish state. I mean, he recently said that Hitler wasn't an anti-Semite. You can't make this up. But he did. He said that.
How do you think that messaging on such a global stage is going to be received by Palestinian leadership?
Well, the reason why we don't have peace with the Palestinians is not because of the rhetoric of Mr. Abbas, with all due respect, is because of their horrible policy mistakes. Whenever a compromise was offered to them, they declined. Now, in diplomacy, when you take the zero-sum approach, meaning all or nothing, there's theoretically 50% you'll end up with nothing. And so far, historically, since 1947, they've been ending up with nothing. And this could change if they will become more pragmatic, if they will understand that you have to take what is given to you at a certain point, like Israel did in 1947 with the partition plan right here at the United Nations. And then you build on it. You build on it and you create a trajectory of progression. But this is not what the Palestinian leadership historically has done. And I think that the Palestinian people is suffering greatly because of this ongoing failure.
The Prime Minister said that he believes that Palestine might become more reasonable moving forward if Saudi Arabia jumps on board with this potential peace agreement, that if other nations come on board, that maybe that they will start recognizing Israel as the true state that it is. What are your thoughts on that? Is that what it's going to take?
Well, I don't think that the Palestinians are in any position to derail the talks between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. And the reason I say that is because basically they ruled themselves out by declining all compromises that were offered to them by Clinton, even George W. Bush administration, 2008, and look at their reaction to the Israeli Gaza pullout. Israeli pullout from Gaza, at least in theory, is the fulfillment of the Palestinian territorial fantasy, right? What do they do with this golden opportunity? The problem that Mr. Netanyahu will have is actually domestic. The question is, will his current coalition be able to support and endorse the deal that is being designed right now between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Israel, for obvious reasons, because of the elements in the government, is pretty much left out of that cycle of negotiations.
Does he have support of conservative members of parliament?
They already announced that they will oppose any concession regarding the Palestinians, even if it's a symbolic one, not to mention the big hot potato, which is, will Israel be supportive of the idea of allowing Saudi Arabia to have a nuclear reactor, which is really the big issue on the table.
I wanted to bring that up here. Another roadblock that the Prime Minister talked about was Iran and the threat it poses in the Middle East to destabilize security and potentially this new bridge he was talking about. What are your thoughts?
So everybody knows the threat that Iran poses. The threat that Iran poses stems in the first place because of the motivations that are at the DNA of this current regime. So whether it's a nuclear bomb or nuclear weapons, chemical weapons or biological weapons, it doesn't matter. The motivation is the problem, what they stand for. And the question is what is being done to contain or to eliminate that threat. And unfortunately, there's a misperception out there in the international community that Iran is predominantly and primarily Israel's problem. It's not. Iran is a problem for the entire international community, and I think it should be dealt by the entire international community.
Well, you've got members of the entire international community tuning in and watching the UNGA. It is the time of year to make that pitch to the public. Ambassador Ido Aharoni, thank you, sir, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.